Hello everyone, today I'm gonna explain how I made the custom Super Mario Bros. Wonder Wiggler race level. But in order to do that, first I'm gonna have to go over how these types of levels work. So how does the Wiggler you race against know how to traverse the level? Well, the Wiggler actor moves to the right by default. It's slightly faster than the player's running speed when it's behind, and slightly slower when it's ahead, which is part of the reason why it's hard to get away from. And each Wiggler race level is filled with special area actors that tell it how to move. So there's actors that make the Wiggler jump, actors that make it dance, actors that make it speed up or slow down, actors that make it turn around, and even actors that can teleport the Wiggler if it's too far behind. And the cool thing about these elements is that they can be dynamically spawned or despawned to change the way the Wiggler traverses the level based on the player's actions. So there's an actor here that makes the Wiggler turn around to navigate its way over top of this piece of terrain, but if the player destroys this crate, the game detects that and deletes that actor, meaning the Wiggler doesn't turn around and also takes this shortcut. A similar thing can also happen here. There's an actor that makes the Wiggler jump over this gap that gets deleted if the player goes down there, making the Wiggler follow along. The only Wiggler race level that doesn't feature these types of tricks is the underwater one, since in these sections it just moves along an invisible rail. In terms of level design, something that's important I think is that none of these levels focus on mechanics the player hasn't likely already seen up to that point. So the first Wiggler race level combines mechanics from the levels Scram Skedaddlers and Bull Rush Coming Through, the second one mostly uses stuff from Leaping Smackerel and Robert Cove, and the final Wiggler race features a mishmash of gimmicks from across the game's worlds. So when it came to choosing what mechanics my level should use, I also decided to blend a few level ideas together. I settled on using the rolling watermelons and melon piranha plants from my level Melon Meltdown, countdown platforms from the Pipe Spike tribe, and some bridge visuals which I originally made for Grinder Gorge. All of those levels use themes that were featured in World 1 of the original game, so the idea is that these might also appear close together in my mods, which makes combining their mechanics in this level a logical choice. I did also use springs, which I haven't incorporated into any of my custom levels yet, but I'm sure I'll end up doing so down the line. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the actual level design process. As is always the case when it comes to these unique types of Super Mario Bros. Wonder levels, it took me a while to get to grips with the specific level design style of Wiggler races. The original game's Wiggler race levels often feature large stretches without interesting gimmicks or anything going on really, and in general they don't contain much mechanical depth or consistency. I tried to do things a bit differently in my level by introducing mechanics gradually and even evolving them subtly as the race progresses, but it was hard to do so whilst also making sure the player could easily run through stuff. So I had quite a number of ambitious ideas for potential setups ahead of time that I didn't end up implementing because they couldn't have worked in this context. Still, I do think I succeeded at making a level that stays true to the approachability of the original game's Wiggler races, whilst also featuring an overall more complex and varied use of gimmicks. What made the rolling watermelons such a perfect mechanic for this type of level is that they're a bit like the zip tracks in one of the original game's Wiggler race levels, but much more dynamic. They can be used both to speed the player up or slow them down, so navigating each section often comes down to choosing a route that either relies on running across the watermelons or avoids them entirely in case they rotate in the wrong direction. I also got pretty lucky as far as the Racing Wiggler's programming is concerned, because thankfully it can move along the complex watermelon collision in a way that mostly doesn't look janky. Still, I did have to be careful as far as the speed of the watermelons go, because the Racing Wiggler can move so slowly when it's ahead of the player that it could potentially be impossible for it to skate across particularly fast-moving melons rotating in the opposite direction. The funny thing about countdown platforms is that these losing their collision after they're touched is basically irrelevant in this level. There's simply no way the player or the Wiggler is ever gonna stick around on one platform for more than like half a second. So the main reason I used these instead of generic platforms is because they're more exciting visually. The fact that the Wiggler could theoretically fall off of any given countdown platform if the timings were to line up imperfectly did pose a unique level design challenge, because I had to make sure every setup could also work if the countdown platforms weren't there for the Wiggler to jump on at all. This is why the majority of the level only features countdown platforms that float above terrain of some sort, and why later I decided to use poison water which the Wiggler could walk through if it were to fall. I wasn't specifically planning on using the melon piranha plants in this level ahead of time, which is why I had to fix a problem with them in the middle of the level design process. See, normally melon piranha plants take like 2 or 3 seconds to start shooting projectiles, which made them functionally pointless in this level since that's long enough for the player to run past them. Luckily, the amount of time it takes for them to start shooting is an internal parameter that I could mess with. So I made a duplicate melon piranha plant actor that shoots almost instantly, which made the mechanic usable. Even though this is now technically the third level in which I used countdown platforms, I don't think the mechanic has gotten super repetitive quite yet, because I keep coming up with new and unique contraptions with them. In this level there are 2 ideas I really latched onto. I wanted to make the race aspect of the level a bit more dynamic by implementing ways in which the player can get a small boost over the Wiggler. So I set up a few countdown platforms that move off of rails really quickly when the player steps on them. Because of the way Wander's momentum works, this means the player basically gets launched as a result of the platform's sudden movement. I also came up with the idea of making large conveyor belt-like setups with the countdown platforms, which serve a similar purpose. The level routing is designed to where walking on the parts of the conveyor belts that move to the left is always the most intuitive thing to do, even though this of course slows the player and the Wiggler down. But if you're paying attention, jumping to the other half of the conveyor belt that moves right once again gives the player a speed boost compared to the Wiggler. As I mentioned earlier, the last quarter of the level is comprised of a kind of cave section that also features poison water. I came up with this part not only because of the very practical need to have the Wiggler be able to wade through the poison water if it were to fall, but also more vaguely because I wanted the level to feature a bit more variation. Although there is progression in the way I used the level's palette of mechanics, I think it would still be fair to argue that some parts feel a bit repetitive. This is less of a problem in the original game's Wiggler race levels because those tend to introduce and drop mechanics repeatedly, which keeps things fresh even if it leads to a less cohesive experience. So even though it is mechanically consistent with the rest of the level, the way the cave section breaks up the level's visuals and vibes still makes it feel somewhat unique and climactic. The level features 2 parts where the Racing Wiggler has to turn around and jump between a few semi-solids to climb up to a higher section. This isn't anything revolutionary. Like I pointed out towards the beginning of this video, the original game's levels also have stuff like this, but I do still feel a bit conflicted about how I implemented these parts compared to the player's routing. In both cases I made it to where the player can mostly skip having to slow down to do any of this by performing 1 or 2 tricky jumps. The idea is that most first-time players won't pull this off right away, meaning it won't be possible for players to get a huge lead on the Wiggler using these shortcuts until you start learning the optimal route. However, I'm not sure if I balanced this stuff perfectly, because the way you can make the racing Wiggler be off-screen for like 10 seconds if you do pull off a trick jump feels a bit overpowered. In fact, in order to make sure you can't leave the racing Wiggler behind forever basically, just like in the original game, I also had to make mine teleport occasionally. If you manage to perform the trick jump that skips the first turnaround semi-solid climb section, the racing Wiggler will still be on your tail during the cave part because it gets teleported there. I think I struck a pretty good balance between making it to where the Wiggler catching up to you this way doesn't completely invalidate the lead that the shortcut gives you, whilst also making sure the Wiggler could still potentially catch up. There is also one more big shortcut in the level that you may have seen me working on, which is the one that allows you to walk over top of the entire cave section. This isn't something that's a super cohesive, thought out part of the level's design or anything. I just realized it would be possible for the player to get up here by jumping on one of the melon piranha plant seeds, and decided to make this a bit of an Easter egg. In fact, calling that thing a shortcut is a bit of a stretch, since I'm pretty sure it actually costs the player time compared to playing through the other route perfectly. Overall, working on this level was definitely a unique experience, not just because I'd never made a Wiggler race before, but also because of the general level structure. Wiggler race levels are technically really quite big, more so than even an average normal level, but at the same time all of the mechanics have to be spread out to allow the player to breeze through stuff, meaning it didn't take that much time or effort to actually design this whole thing. These days it tends to take me like a week to make a normal level, but I made this one in 2 days. The only part of the process that wasn't any easier was decorating, since the level is still massive and needs to feature decorations just as frequently as a normal level. So as you've probably seen from this last part of the time-lapse, getting all of the various types of foliage and bridge decorations in place took a lot of time. But either way, now that that's done, let me show the finished thing to you in-game. Okay, and here we are. I'm not really sure how this is gonna work, because obviously I want to run through the level because it's a race, but I also want to talk about stuff, and usually I kind of pause to do that, but I guess here we go. So we have a countdown platform and some coins and stuff that get spawned there to get the player to go over there. You can see the Wiggler kind of run around the, run over top of the watermelons pretty nicely. The Wiggler will actually jump up here if I had jumped up there a bit more quickly to sort of have the difficulty curve with the player's skill, but because I was kind of slow that didn't end up happening, and that's fine. It's kind of an example of one of those little tricks that I highlighted at the start of the video. Then here you can see the watermelons going down there was actually the faster route. Oh, you can see the Wiggler actually took the faster route in that case as well. That just depends on the timing of the platforms, I suppose. Then here we can jump on these melon seeds to kind of skip over this whole section, and as you can see the Wiggler is going to be really bloody slow, but we can already go down here, and now actually the Wiggler has been teleported to where now it's actually caught up again. And yeah, here's kind of some of more like the same sort of ideas with the conveyor belt setups, and once again we can jump up here to kind of skip a lot of stuff, and with this little shortcut thing we're already at the end. I'm actually gonna go back and show the shortcut section as well, so stick around. Yeah, so if you kind of slow down here to jump on these melon seeds, you can get up here, and this is the shortcut. That's not really a shortcut because it actually kind of takes longer than the normal route, but I suppose it's definitely easier. And yeah, if we keep moving now, we're way ahead of the Wiggler, but I still make sure it teleports back over to the finish line once you get to this section. And yeah guys, that's gonna do it for this video, so if you enjoyed, maybe consider leaving a like or subscribing or checking out my Discord server or becoming a channel member. Thank you so much for watching, see you later, and bye bye!